everyone. I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer. And into today's episode, we're going to be talking about Josh Hart and the contract situation going on with him now. It's being reported that it'll be an estimated around $18 million, and that the Knicks and Josh Hart are in a pretty good position in terms of, being in a situation where they'll retain him. It seems like all signs indicate that the Knicks will be bringing him back for next season. I think that's the right move. If it's $18 million a year, you imagine it's around a 3 to 4 year deal. Not saying that, of course, we're not saying the deal is done or anything like that. That's just what we're hearing, what we're reading, based on, reports about the situation. So we wanted to give you guys our take on it, kind of talk about, whether that's his market value, whether the Knicks would be getting a good deal out of that, all that stuff. But before we do all of that, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. And Dylan, I just want to know, number one, how do you feel about Josh Hart in terms of bringing him back? I'm pretty sure you would want to bring him back. But number two, do you think this would be a fair deal, and kind of your reasoning behind that, your take on that?
Right, so first off, to answer your question, yes, of course I would love to bring Josh Hart back. I think the second we got him in that trade for Cam Reddish, his impact showed right away with pretty much everything. Transition finishing, three-point shooting, rebounding especially, better defense, all that stuff, and solid playmaking as well. Pretty much just does it all. He doesn't do anything like at an elite level, but he does everything at a pretty good level for a backup especially. So, I think if they can bring it back at like an 18 mil a year type thing, between the numbers of 16 mil a year to 18 mil a year, I think is a fair range. And like you said, 3 to 4 year deal, I think that's what they should do. Try to keep him playing alongside like guys like Jalen Brunson for as long as you can, because those two clearly play very well together. So I think, keeping him for a rather longer term deal is a smart move. Of course, I don't think you should sign the guy for much more than 18 mil a year. I really don't think you need to go more than that. I don't think because he's not exactly the type of guy that like averages 20 points or anything like that, or does anything crazy in the box scores. He's just an impactful player on the floor, but he doesn't do anything like amazing to where he should be making, close to $100 million in total value. But with that being said, I think 18 mil a year is a fair range. And, I just want to pull something up here. There are 3 guys that are making more money than Josh Hart would be. Let's say Hart were to sign for 18 mil a year. These are 3 guys that would be either making the same amount of money or more money. I'm just going to name these 3 guys. DeAndre Hunter, $22.5 million a year. Bojan Bogdanovic, $19.5 million a year. Duncan Robinson, 18 mil a year, so the same amount. OG Anunoby, also 18 mil. That's 4 guys, not 3, but still, you get the point. Those are some guys right there that would be making more or the same amount of money as Josh Hart. Now, I will tell you straight up right now that Josh Hart is 1,000% better than DeAndre Hunter and Duncan Robinson, and you could probably say he's better than Bogdanovic as well. The only one out of those 4 guys that may be better than him is OG Anunoby, but he is definitely better than the other 3. And if the Knicks can get him for 18 mil a year, that's a steal in my opinion. That's like, like I said before, I don't think he should be making much more than that, but I do think other teams would shell out more money for him. And I think the Knicks can find a good way to get good value out of him. And, I want to add, too, the Knicks signed Evan Fournier two off seasons ago to that same contract, $18 million a year. At the time, it didn't look like a bad contract. Yeah, it wasn't great defense, but, he shot the ball really well. Add some offense. It didn't look like the worst contract in the world. Now that he doesn't play, it looks like an awful contract, right? But at the time, it didn't look so bad. But with Josh Hart, I feel like there isn't really going to be a situation where you can't really play him. I feel like you're always going to find a way to be able to get him on the floor as long as he's available, because he impacts the game in other ways other than scoring. He's not just a spot-up shooter. He also rebounds really well. He makes solid plays with the ball. He finishes well in transition, like I've said, all that stuff. So it's kind of just my take on it. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, no. I think the best way to look at this is as you've done it with it, which is kind of comparing the contracts of guys around making that much money, and kind of seeing where they're at. If you look at $18 million exactly, that would rank as the 84th highest AAV in all of basketball. I would say Josh Hart is one of the 84 most impactful players in basketball, or at least he was last year. And that's not adjusting for the fact that obviously rookies, guys on their first or second year in the league, are not going to be making $18 million a year. So factoring all that into the equation here, I think that that's really good market value, right? And the Knicks have done a really good job at bringing guys in at market value, if not better. You think of the Josh Hart deal, but that Jalen Brunson deal, right? That's getting a player well below market value in terms of what they're getting paid, right? He's making what 20. Let me double check what he made last year. He made somewhere around $25 million, if I'm not mistaken. It was not a ton of money relative to the performance you got. Yeah, it was $26 million, the 57th highest annual.
Something I want to add
salary.
about Brunson's contract too. It's a descending contract, so
Correct.
he's only going to play better. And the fact that we got him on a descending deal, that's awesome. So clearly they've managed that really well. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, like last year his cap hit was $27 million. This year it'll be 26. Now he has a player option after the 2024-2025 season. I imagine he'll take it, but that's way down the road. But with that being said, the Knicks have done a pretty good job bringing in guys, and for the most part getting free agents or getting players, at a pretty good value. I trust them to continue to do that. Leon Rose has showed he is not the type of guy to go out and try to acquire a big fish without that big fish being the piece he needs. We saw at the deadline, right? Everyone was like, oh, they only got Josh Hart. Or not everyone, but there were some critics about, the Knicks only got Josh Hart. Is that enough? Was there, as you mentioned, OG Anunoby was a guy that was available, but considering the picks that they would have had to give up, would that have been worth it? Probably not. The Knicks have done a pretty good job at not, straying away from their process and straying away from how they value players. So, I guess I'll ask you this, do you think Josh Hart's production from this year, like, obviously the 3-point shooting is sustainable. I think he shot a ridiculous percentage he shot 50% from three on low volume. Like, that's not happening again. Or at least I don't think it would. I would love for that to happen, but it's not. What would you say is like a reasonable projection in terms of like not points per game, all that stuff, because that's a little bit like fluky and all that, that can fluctuate year to year. But in terms of like player value, where do you think he's going to sit next year in terms of across the league? Like, where do you think is a good range for us to expect Josh Hart to be? Like, obviously not top 10 or 20, but like, what do you think is a reasonable range for that?
Right, like, Josh Hart, like I mentioned before, Josh Hart is one of the guys that, he doesn't exactly pop out in the stat sheet. Maybe in rebounding categories he does for guards, but everything else not necessarily. He's one of those guys you have to watch to see his impact, and you see it pretty much in everything. He's kind of the jack of all trades guy, so therefore I view him as a very high valued player. Do I view him as somebody like super, super high value? Like you said, 10 to 20? Of course not. I don't, because he's not the type of guy that starts and averages 25 a game and does all that as well. No, he's not like a Giannis, but he's someone that like you feel like they could be undervalued a little bit because they're that impactful. I'm not saying that the Knicks should shell out more money because of that. No, of course not. But, I think the $18 million a year range is very reasonable, and I think that's, a really good deal the Knicks could get because, like I mentioned before, teams probably saw how Josh Hart was playing in the playoffs, maybe not in the Miami series, but especially in the Cleveland series, saw how impactful he is on both sides of the floor, and teams might have saw that and be like, dang, I really wish we got that guy because he can pretty much do everything. I would give him extra money if it meant I could get him on my team. Team GMs might be thinking that. Of course, I'm not a mind reader, so I could be wrong. Maybe they weren't thinking that. But, he's that impactful. So, therefore, just with that being said, I mean, the Knicks could get a contract with Josh Hart for, like, say, 4 years, $72 million total, $18 million a year. That'd be a great deal. That'd be a pretty good deal to me. I think it's worth that given how impactful he is. I think you definitely need to keep the guy around, even if you do a 3-year deal for $18 million a year. I mean, that's still also really good. I think that's worth it. You know what I mean? So, like, I think he's got that much value as a player that, like, he deserves to get this type of contract. But I also think that, the Knicks are playing this very smart and they're not just like giving out extra money because they see that like, oh, he's that good and that impactful even in this short amount of time. No, they're not just going to give him $100 million contract because I think that would be kind of silly. You know what I mean? I love Josh Hart. I just don't think they would ever do that and should do that. I think what they're projected to possibly reach with these contracts is very reasonable. And I think a lot of Knicks fans expected it to be that way, So just to wrap up my point, basically, I really Josh Hart, very high value player. He plays like he's got like that 20 mil type of year type, play style. But we all know that if you do that, it has a higher chance to backfire than not. So playing it a little safer and bringing it down to 18 million a year, especially when you have his bird rights as a team, being a New York Knicks here, so you have the best chance to bring him back. Taking that to your advantage, It's the best way to approach it, in my opinion. It's kind of just my thoughts on it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, ultimately, the way I view it is that, the New York Knicks are getting a strong role player in Josh Hart. I know that the term role player has been given a negative connotation, right? But, they're really important. Your depth and, what those role players provide for your team is remarkably important to how good you are as a team, right? Look at the Phoenix Suns, right? You don't think that Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are thinking, man, if our role player situation, if our depth was a little bit better, maybe we're playing right now, maybe we're not sitting at home, right? Like it's not like they played poorly in that series either. They were going ballistic all series. I mean, 30 points here, 30 points there. Those are two of the most talented scorers, not just in basketball today, but two of the most talented scorers of our generation, right? KD especially. I mean, he has an argument to be the most talented scorer of all time. And you look at the Knicks, right, as the example. This is a great example here, right? Because the Knicks went from pretty good, like play-in caliber, maybe sneak into the 6th seed to get bounced out in the first round, to this team play like a finals contender for the last 2 months. People may like scoff at that notion and go, oh, well, they were never really truly finals contenders. I'm not saying that they were going to go out and win the NBA finals. I'm not saying they were going to go out and beat the Boston Celtics. I'm not saying they were going to go out and beat the Nuggets or the Suns or a team like that. But what I'm sitting here and saying is that if you look at their record, if you look at their net rating, if you look at all those things, they played like an NBA finals contender. And that's what matters. And that was after they acquired Josh Hart. Now, was part of that certain guys stepped up? Absolutely. I'm not saying Josh Hart is the reason why, RJ Barrett played better in the postseason, though maybe that influenced it, right? Who knows? But my point more so is Josh Hart unlocked something for this team. He was a huge part of their ability to play unbelievable defense, especially off the bench. He gave them a little bit more spacing, which is something that they needed. They still need that, but, any improvement to your spacing situation helps. I guess, to kind of give my last thoughts on this before I hand it off to you to see, what you have to add on about this. It feels like Josh Hart isn't just a piece of this team. Now, I feel like he's part of the core of this team, at least for right now. Like, I don't know how this team's going to shake things up in the offseason. I don't know if there's going to be any massive moves or whatever that may be, but for right now, Josh Hart's one of the most impactful players in the Knicks. He's one of the most beloved players in the Knicks. He's one of the faces of this team right now. Bringing him back brings back someone that is beloved in that locker room, beloved by the fan base, and also, of course, improves your play on the court. He gets a training camp to work with the Knicks. He gets an entire offseason to train with these guys. You imagine the synergy only gets better, right? I'm really excited to see, if they bring back Josh Hart, which again looks like they will, to see how he's able to play over a full season with the New York Knicks and what their record looks like with that. But I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Dylan, if you want to add on anything there.
Right. I mean, I kind of just want to say, I second what you just said. I do feel him as a core piece at this point. That's why I think they should retain him for a longer term deal instead of just, a small deal. He deserves to get like a 3 or 4 year contract, and it seems like that's the direction that they're heading in toward this. So, yeah, I definitely view him as a core piece. I don't think that the Knicks' solid play with him, since we got him in the trade was coincidental. I think that was because he's that impactful as a player and can help other players, reach their potential a little more. Do I think he's like the quote unquote needle threader? No, I don't. I feel like, they still need to go after some other guys in the offseason, but I think he's the start of that kind of process to building a better team. You know what I mean? You got a guy who has really good chemistry with your stars, especially. He's played with Jalen Brunson before. He's played with Julius Randle before. You got a guy who, like I said, he has chemistry with his stars. He does well on every other area of the game. He shoots the ball well. He finishes well. The rebounding, especially, man. The rebounding goes a long way, especially at the guard forward position type area. That goes a long way. You know what I mean? There aren't many guys that, can do that. What Josh Hart does in that area of his game, in that position, there's not many that can do that. So therefore, he already has some value right there. And then you just add on the scoring, the playmaking, the defense, things like that, and it gets even better. And like what you said, I'm more excited to see what he can do in a full season with the New York Knicks because, like you said, once they get this contract situation finished up, then he'll have a full off season with the Knicks. He'll be in training camp with them. He'll get to work out with these guys in the off season. He'll get to work out with some of these Knicks players more often in the off season, even in just like shoot arounds or in open gyms, whatever you want to call it, whatever they do for workouts in the off season. I think he has a good opportunity to get even better next season, and if he does, which I will hope, fingers crossed that he gets even better than what he was this season, then we have a very big piece on the Knicks team. We have a core piece. Even if he comes off the bench, he's an integral piece to this team. There aren't many guys, not many teams are blessed to have a guy like that who comes off the bench or even starts, but most of the time come off the bench and provide that big of an impact on so many areas of the game. Usually most teams will have like that one guy that, oh, he's a great shooter off the bench. He's our shooter. He's our 40% 3-point shooter that we have come off the bench or something like that. Or, oh, he's our best defender. We have him come off the bench. Da da da. No, Josh Hart basically does like everything. Nothing elite, but does more than what most role players in a sense can do. There aren't many role players that have as many like, facets to his game as Josh Hart does, and that's why he's so valuable. And no, this isn't like a, Josh Hart is an amazing player type video. This is a Josh Hart is an impactful player type video. Of course he has plenty of room to improve. Of course he's not a perfect player, but I think he's a really good fit for this Knicks team. So I think, bringing him in was the smart move, and I think keeping him around for the long term will be the even smarter move. And I think you can build a good core with him on this team. I do think you can. Those are kind of my final thoughts on it. What do you think?
End of the day, he's an excellent fit for this team, and quite frankly, I'm looking at the Knicks with Josh Hart, and I'm saying, you add Josh Hart back to this team, and I'm willing to say that this team could run it back and put themselves in a really good spot. Obviously, you'd like to see them do a little bit more. Again, spacing, shooting, those are things that I would like them to add, but adding Josh Hart is one of the biggest additions you can make this offseason. Just kind of look at the landscape of things that are realistic, of course. Obviously, we can daydream about Joel Embiid, but the percentage chance of it happening is definitely below 50%, well below 50%. So, out of all the realistic moves, Josh Hart's probably one of the most impactful players left in this market. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate you guys, checking us out. We hope you guys leave your opinions in the comment section below. You can check out our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page. You guys can also check out our TikTok. We are posting there constantly, so make sure you guys check all that stuff out. You can follow our personal Twitters. They're above our heads. And with that being said, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.